We are like the spider. We weave our life and then move along in it. We are like the dreamer who dreams and then lives in the dream. This is true for the entire universe.
Look at us in the movie theater lobby and tell us if you've known us before.
Brandon, it's me. It's me, Leia.
If it was tomorrow, you'd be listening to another podcast over there.
I'm going to find out one day.
Were there any listeners?
Had something to do with the telling of information.
I have a secret.
Damn, this sounds like dialogue from Inland Empire.
There are consequences to one's actions, and there would, for certain, be consequences to wrong actions. Dark they would be, and inescapable. Why instigate a need to suffer?
Inland Empire, a 2006 very David Lynchian vision of
This is going to be a different
drama.
episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for anyone sort of disjointed by the opening there. We tried to go a little Lynchian in style, and
I think it worked.
yeah, maybe.
I think it drove home the point.
Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, here we go. A record rotates, and we hear an explanation.
Axon N, the longest running radio play in history. Tonight, continuing in the Baltic region, a gray winter day in an old hotel.
A dark hallway, black and white. A man and a woman speaking in Polish, faces blurred. There's inference that they have sex. In the next scene, the film is now in color. A woman sits on the bed draped in a red sheet. This is a character credited as Lost Girl, though we never actually do get her name. And she is played by Karolina Gruszka. She's crying in front of a TV playing static, with brief interjections of a video of a woman in fast motion. As the music fades, the video changes, and next, we have the rabbits.
Naturally.
One in a blue suit enters the room, and a sitcom audience applauds. Another rabbit in a red dress irons clothing in the background, while yet another sits stoically on the couch. After a brief and disjointed conversation, rather similar to the one we had in our opening, the blue suit rabbit leaves the room and enters an opulent and lavish sitting room. The rabbit fades away, and suddenly, two brash men have a conversation, really driving home the point to make sure that one understands the other. In the next cut, we find an actor, Nikki Grace, played by Laura Dern, in a very upscale-looking house, with that woman from the fast-forward video introducing herself as the new neighbor.
Just down the way. Tucked back in the small woods. The brick house.
The new neighbor asks about the new role that Nikki has gotten. We, of course, get some more uncomfortable dialogue involving lost children.
A little girl went out to play. Lost in the marketplace.
Brutal fucking murder.
Brutal fucking murder.
Lost memory and musings on time. Actions do have consequences. Which seemingly confuses Nikki, but jumps us to tomorrow when she is sitting.
If it was tomorrow, you would be sitting over there.
A phone call comes in from her manager, and she celebrates having gotten the part in question as her husband Piotrek, played by Peter J. Lucas, looks on disapprovingly from the stairs above. Another scene later, we meet the remaining two of the main cast, Kingsley Stewart, played by Jeremy Irons, and Devin Burke, Nikki's co-lead actor, played by Justin Theroux. They speak of big successes and a hopeful comeback of sorts for Nikki if this film, On High in Blue Tomorrows, is done right. One more scene change before we just leave the rest to David Lynch and the cast. On the set of a talk show, Marilyn Levin's Starlight Celebrity Show, Nikki and Devin sit for an interview. Some catty words are exchanged and allusions to possible future infidelity are levied at the two actors. Devin gets combative and wants no part in the accusations. And with the tension really ramping up, let's get on out of here and let them do their thing.
Should we start talking about some of the players?
Yes, let's get to the contributionists.
I think we should start with David Lynch. Because
If
he's kind of
there's-
like the
Yeah.
figure for this movie.
Yeah, the catalyst of everything.
Yeah, I mean, he's the director, the producer, the writer.
Mhm.
He's got it all.
Yeah, he even has a small little cameo.
Boss, you want the 2K down? You want it down?
You know, I think it's interesting. David Lynch has really only directed 10 feature films, but 123 directing credits to his name, 75 writing credits, and 58 producing credits, among a myriad of
Yeah.
other artistic creations, artwork, comic strips, cartoons. I mean, he's really dabbles in just about every media that there is.
He is artistically prolific.
He was artistically
It was, yes.
Every time we talk about him, I always have to be like,
yeah.
he was.
I can't stop talking about him in the present tense.
Yeah.
But he loved making short films. That
He
was kind
did,
of his bread
yeah.
and butter, his favorite thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, this film started as just a concept of a series of short films.
Yeah, and then snowballed into this movie. So, you know, I talked about him directing 10 feature films. Some of the ones that are more of highly note are Eraserhead,
Mhm.
for which he does have a selection in the registry by the Library of Congress.
Yeah, that was his first feature film.
That was his first feature film. He also did The Elephant Man. That one's a little bit more mainstream if you don't want to be totally confused. That one's really more of a...
It has a very defined plot.
It does, yeah. So there's Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, and Mulholland Drive.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the television series Twin Peaks,
Twin Peaks.
which is not confusing, but very David Lynchian in its...
There's some parts that are a little like, what the hell am I watching?
There are. Oh, yeah. I
But-
forgot about the...
But
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
It still has a plot you can follow, even if you miss the David Lynch stuff.
Yeah. There's still a followable plot.
Yes.
And then, of course, he did Twin Peaks: The Return as well in
Yep.
2017.
And Fire Walk with Me, the associated movie, too.
Yeah. I found that there's no way to get any commentary from
Right.
David Lynch. Because why?
Because he will not do commentaries. He will not explain his films or stories because he believes they speak for themselves.
Yes. So if anybody wants to come at us and say this is not what the movie's about, I'm sorry, but that's your
Yeah.
opinion, man.
And that's exactly the way Lynch wanted it.
like that's your opinion, man.
Yeah. Like that's just your opinion, man. He wants everyone to form their own opinions. David Lynch also is very well known for being very into transcendental meditation.
Didn't you do like 20 minutes every day?
20 minutes, at least 20 minutes a day since 1973.
Yeah, wow.
He also was big into reincarnation, concepts of samsara and karma, and a very mindful
Yeah.
kind of
And
guy.
on the flip side, very science oriented
Yeah.
and into unified field theory
Mhm.
and, you know, multi-universes and time travel and
It's big metaphysical concepts.
yeah.
Yep.
All that meditating gave him lots of time to think, I think.
Yeah, I think so. His mind was open.
He didn't live as long as we'd all hoped he'd live.
Yeah. Emphysema had a little something to say in that.
Had a little bit of something to say about that because he was a long-term smoker.
Oh boy, was he ever.
And we actually didn't realize he had emphysema until 2024, August of 2024. But he was diagnosed back in 2020, so he had been living with it for quite some time.
Right.
Interestingly, my boss lives in California,
Mhm.
and we had just discussed all the fires that were happening in California.
Sure.
That actually had a really big impact on his health. You know, he was reliant on an oxygen tank during the end, and his immune system was severely
Yeah.
compromised. The Southern California fires from January 2025 actually forced him to evacuate, which the evacuation, the stress on his body, and then all of the smoke that was in the air, it was too much for his
Yeah.
body, sadly.
I was reading an interview with one of, I think it was an assistant or somebody else that was in the crew of this
Mhm.
film. And they said that while they were doing location scouting, David Lynch had stipulated with his location scout, he said, any place you find for us to film, I must be able to smoke. So that was a
Yeah,
hard
I
stipulation.
I think he went out the way he had expected he might.
Yeah, I would think so.
So yeah, I also mentioned he was a producer and the writer. So
Mhm.
I mean, we won't have any producers or writers for this one. Laura Dern, big time Lynch collaborator. She plays Nikki Grace and Susan Blue in this film.
Mhm.
She also has appeared in one film that was recognized in the Library of Congress. Can you guess which one?
I would say probably Jurassic Park.
Ding, 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 ding.
I thought so.
You got it right.
Surprise, surprise.
She's in this movie with her mother. Her mother's Diane Ladd. She's actually been in 5 other movies with her mom where she plays her daughter.
Right.
She was in White Lightning, Rambling Rose, Wild at Heart, Citizen Ruth, and Daddy and Them. She was also in another movie, which is called Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which is actually one of her first films where she just eats ice cream.
If you can get a role eating ice cream, why the hell not?
She wasn't mother-daughter in that one, but she appeared in that one, and her mom was in that one.
Yeah.
And then, of course, she was in Inland Empire with her mom as well. She really wanted to get into acting, and she was eating ice cream cones, and she ate I don't know, I think it was 11 ice cream cones.
Ooh.
Ate all of them.
Nice.
Didn't get sick.
What a gig.
Yeah. And the director of that film was like, you got to get her into acting because she could eat ice cream.
Why
guess.
not?
Yeah, why not?
It's a key talent. We should also mention that Diane Ladd's role in this movie was as Marilyn Levins on the talk show. Oh, and one last little credit to give to Laura Dern, because it may connect to perhaps the next person we talk about if we talk about Justin Theroux. Laura Dern had a role in Star Wars Episode 8.
And that's funny, too, because I think David Lynch was actually asked if he wanted to direct Star Wars Episode 6.
Yes.
And he turned it down.
Uh-huh.
A little roundabout Star Wars connection there.
Yeah, David Lynch turned down Episode 6. He liked the story, but he felt it wasn't his style.
And he wanted to be able to have full control like he does with everything that he does.
And I think David Lynch very much doesn't like doing other people's work, interpreting or filming other people's work.
Which is evident from when he did Dune.
Exactly, yes. Dune, it is definitely credited to Lynch, and it was his directorial feature.
Yes.
But he hated it.
Yeah,
he hated
to the day he died, he hated it.
He hated the movie. He was embarrassed by it.
Didn't even go by a pen name when they re-released the deluxe version or something like that.
A lot of directors, when they're embarrassed by a production that they're doing or they want no association with it, they will adopt the moniker Alan Smithy.
I don't remember if it was Alan Smithy, but I did recall that he went full out of there.
Not a fan. He did the movie only under contract in order to get funding for one of his movies.
Well, sometimes you gotta whore yourself out a little bit, to get what you need. No shame in the game, okay?
No. Let's talk about Justin Theroux just a wee bit.
Sure.
Then, yeah?
He seems pretty private. He's handsome.
Oh, he's certainly a handsome fellow. There's no denying that.
Yeah.
But he was also in Mulholland Drive and American Psycho.
Can I just briefly talk about Carolina Gruska?
I insist we do.
So she played the Lost Girl.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really interesting. She is multilingual.
Yeah.
Seriously multilingual. She knows Polish, English, German, French, and Russian.
Yep. Oh, I'm so envious.
Yeah, I know. I wish I knew at least one other language, let alone that many.
Mm-hmm.
Inland Empire was actually a production with the Polish theater over there, too.
Yep,
so it was
a joint production.
A joint production, yeah. So there's a lot of Polish actors in this film. I can't really pronounce most of their names.
Right.
Nor can I pronounce the film that shot up her acting career.
Right.
I'm going to just murder it right now. It's Kachinkawi Zimmeroni. But that's kind of where she had brought all of her recognition and her acclaim.
I'm not familiar with Polish film.
Not either.
I don't know which of her credits are notable, which are not. She did recently have a role in a film called Marie Curie, The Courage of Knowledge, where she played
Marie Curie.
Exactly. So I thought that was pretty awesome. We don't see the Lost Girl a ton in the movie.
She's poignant in this film. Very important.
She's extremely significant.
Yeah.
To the point where, of course, like we mentioned, David Lynch wants everyone to have their own interpretation.
Yeah.
In my opinion, she's the main character.
I agree. She's playing the main character, but she's not seen the most.
Yeah, she's not the featured character, but she is the main.
She's what the whole film's about, in my opinion. In our opinion.
In our opinion, yep.
The only other one I kind of wanted to talk a little bit briefly about was Harry Dean Stanton. So he's also in 5 films that are in the Library of Congress.
Okay.
So he was in How the West Was Won, Cool Hand Luke, 2 Lane Blacktop, The Godfather Part 2, and Alien. Every time I see him, I know who he is.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody said, "Hey, name a movie he's been in," I'd be like, "Oh."
Yeah. Just before we get out of this segment, I do want to just quickly mention Peter J. Lucas.
Okay.
Because he plays Piotrek, Nikki's husband.
Yep.
He also has the role of Smithy, who is basically the character that Lost Girl really loved.
We're not going to touch on too much of these other ones, but Jeremy Irons is in this. There's also brief appearances by Natasha Kinski, Laura Herring, Terry Crews, Mary Steenburgen, Diane Ladd, of course, we just talked about. And then at the very beginning, William H. Macy's in this film as well. And then the rabbits are actually the voices of Laura Herring, Naomi Watts, and Scott Coffey.
Yeah, from Mulholland Drive.
They're the voices for the rabbits in Lynch's 2002 Rabbits sitcom or whatever.
Yeah, the rabbits that appear here and the set that they're on began their life basically as a short video series on David Lynch's website. He found reason to put them in this movie, and that's why they're there.
Yeah, they're awful confusing. I think I still don't quite fully understand the purpose, but I've got my own thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So. All right, so let's talk about some of the acclaim for the film, shall we?
Okay, let's talk about what everybody else thought of this movie.
Yeah, right? So it has some long legs, which sometimes when the legs are really, really long, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's numbers being silly.
Yeah, so the legs for this one's 22.63.
Yeah, that's the silly number.
That's the silly number. That's pretty high. Domestic box office, it made 1.1 million. Worldwide, domestic and international, it made 4.3 million. Like I said before, it was like a Polish production as well. So that's probably why it did so much more, worldwide. Opening weekend, it did $27,508 with a production budget of between 2.9 and 3 million. It basically broke even. Yeah. It didn't get many awards. There's a few, they're not real common ones, though, not ones that I'm real familiar with. I think the most common one that I saw was the 2007 National Society of Film Critics Award for experimental film.
Most David Lynch things get plenty of acclaim and plenty of critic notoriety.
Yeah.
Rarely do they get awards.
Yeah. I mean, he got the National Registry for Eraserhead. I think he's gotten quite a few awards for The Elephant Man.
Yeah.
A lot of his other films, not so much. Yeah.
Well, of course, I will throw in their taglines.
Some taglines.
The marketing department
had no idea
what to do with this movie. They were all scratching their heads and asses probably at the same time, trying to figure out what do we do.
You imagine being on that marketing team? It'd be like, how the time do we market this?
Yeah. The tagline is short, simple.
Short and sweet.
Basically, they took David Lynch's brief summary of the film when David Lynch presented it to producers.
And that's what they used?
And that's exactly what they used. Ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
A woman in trouble.
Okay.
That's it.
All right.
That's how David Lynch explained it.
Perfect.
That's how they marketed it. And really, honestly,
that's good.
There's, I think, probably no better summary for this movie.
No, there really isn't.
Yeah. This film is just about woman as an entity, as a historical woman in trouble.
Brilliant. So I just wanted to talk briefly about a little bit of the inspiration for the film, which is interesting. It wasn't a concept that he fleshed out into a movie. It was supposed to be like David asking Laura, hey, let's experiment a little.
Yes.
And she's like, okay.
David Lynch, just like every other director in Hollywood, worked off of film cameras.
Yeah.
David Lynch got himself a hold of a tiny little Sony digital handheld camera, and he fell in love with it.
Yeah, because he could use it so much easier.
Not have to stop and reload film. He could shoot for 40 minutes without having to stop.
Yeah.
He loved it. Of course, with film, you run out, it's expensive. You need to load a new canister. You run out, get another canister. Your work is consuming physical space. With digital, he could shoot something else. He could look at it again. He could change it if he wants to. He's got so much room to work with.
Yeah.
His mind went crazy.
His mind was blown.
Yes.
So yeah, he had just moved to Laura Dern's neighborhood, and that's when he had said, "Hey, let's do a short for his website, davidlynch.com, like the rabbit stuff." He would do the weather report.
Yeah, daily weather report.
Report. He was kind of the father of subscription services.
Yeah, he really was.
Which is really interesting. He started his own subscription service.
Yeah.
Before that was even really a thing.
Yeah.
And people paid it.
Yeah, people did.
Yeah.
He stopped it willingly because he said, I feel bad charging people $10 a month and not getting enough content.
And, toward the end, he stopped putting content out,
Mhm.
but it wasn't because he didn't want to. He had told people, like, if I feel inspired, I'll do
Yeah.
more.
He's never been a man to create art because others demand it.
Yeah.
He's always been, if I'm
If it's
inspired.
feeling like in the moment.
Yep.
Yeah.
Most of his projects come directly from dreams that he has had or experiences he's had while meditating.
In developing these short stories for Inland Empire, he used, of course, the rabbits. He took themes from The Darkened Room, which I think is another short. So he had an abandoned series, Axon N. So he used that as well as part of the development for this film.
Yeah.
So you're still confused while you're watching the movie,
Sure.
but they all kind of work together.
They really do.
In a way.
For every one of his films, there's a woman that he works with, and she's been his editor on basically everything.
Uh-huh.
This is the only movie she's never edited because David Lynch said there's no way anyone else could have edited this except
Because they
for
wouldn't
me.
figure it out.
They would have had no idea the threads he was finding in all the little shorts
Because he was doing
that
it
he was
on the
filming.
fly.
Yeah.
There's also, I had mentioned that he was into unified field theory.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea behind that, for him at least, was that he was trying not to force any of these ideas to have structure, which is what we had talked about. Rather, he would write and shoot scenes periodically as the mood struck, giving little thought to how they would relate to one another and trusting the larger picture and eventually revealing itself to him himself, because he had no idea that it was even being revealed to him himself.
Mm-hmm.
He thought, there's no way that there couldn't be a fragment that doesn't relate to everything in this film. I just don't know how you think that way.
Yeah.
That's chaos.
It is very weird.
That was his whole approach to this film.
A big overarching theme of this film is that actions have consequences.
Yes.
And I feel like that was almost what he was finding in the shorts that he was shooting. This action could be interpreted as forming a consequence, which is this next short.
Yeah.
And just slapping them together and finding where everything kind of dominoed through.
Yeah. And it really, the film started with Laura Dern doing like a monologue, which you see in the film, I believe, at the beginning.
I couldn't find exactly which scenes were shot first, but wasn't it the ones where she's got that really heavy Southern accent and she's monologuing to the man behind the desk, Mr. K, I think they refer to him as in the film. Weren't those the first scenes that were shot, I believe?
I just know it was a monologue that she was doing, and it was a really long monologue, and they were really in the moment and really having a good time doing it. I mean, Laura Dern had said that was that was the best times she'd ever had was doing those monologues with Lynch.
In this movie, she's only credited as playing Sue and Nikki, but from my interpretation, at least, she's played many other characters in this film.
Yeah.
They're just not explicitly called out.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say this is probably one of her best acting pieces, too. I mean, it really shows her range. David
Lynch believed so heavily that she did such a phenomenal performance in this film that he did a very unconventional... Did you hear about what he did to market, to a larger extent, Laura Dern?
He wanted her to get an Oscar, and so he was promoting her to get her an Oscar, which... She never got a nomination.
No, she didn't. A lot of producers, a lot of studios, a lot of managers will do these very elaborate, for your consideration promotion campaigns. And David Lynch's promotional campaign for Laura Dern, he went down to, I guess, quote unquote, the middle of Hollywood. He sat in a chair with a cow.
A full-ass cow.
A handheld poster and a megaphone.
Giant picture of her face on it.
And say... For your consideration, Laura Dern.
So Lynch.
Yeah,
man.
it really is. So the man really believed in the performance. And she did a great performance. She really did.
She did, yeah. I usually do like an in with the out, the old in with the new kind of a thing. The only thing I wanted to really mention was, and you had already kind of touched on it, that he was using digital. He acknowledged the fact that the digital film didn't look great.
Right.
It was kind of almost ugly.
Yeah.
But he said he liked the lower quality because it reminded him of 1930s films. He said he also enjoyed the fact that camera captures less information. So this is a quote from him, if there's some question about what you're seeing or some dark corner, the mind can go dreaming.
Right. Yeah, a little bit of visual pareidolia could happen in the darkness.
Yeah.
Something like that. He often referred to his little Sony camera as his beautiful, ugly little thing.
Yeah.
which I thought was pretty cool.
It's poignant.
Yeah.
Because you're right. It's not as nice as film.
Right.
Like it's going to have especially when he was using it.
He was so enamored with this experience. He said, I'm never going back to film. I'm sticking to digital, something along those lines.
It sound just like it too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think the very next feature film he did was on film again.
Yeah,
so
he went back to film. He flips-flops.
Yeah, he did have fun with his digital experience, but I think he understood that the look he wanted was particular to this film.
I kind of want to move into talking about the concepts of the film in terms of like how my first run through with it and how I felt about the film and my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Because they're pretty lowball in terms of like what I thought of it the first time around without doing any research or like really looking into other people's ideas or the thought process behind some of this.
If we continued on just trying to throw out more information about the production of the film, it would just a whole bunch of anecdotes.
Yeah.
And I think trying to give information about, kind of what we thought about the film and what the most common accepted interpretations of the film, I think are definitely worth delving into. So for anybody who feels like they came here just to hear some cool things about the production of Inland Empire, you've probably reached about the point of that.
Pretty much the pinnacle, yeah. I mean, there may be some more down the road, but I think most of it's going to be just talking about like some of the concepts. And
we're going to take on the task of we're not going to explain
the movie
Inland Empire
you
to
can't.
you. Even if we did, we would not hit all the explanations.
No. And y'all are going to have different opinions, man.
We will come at you with
our interpretation.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with my interpretation.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you my interpretation before research.
Okay.
And my interpretation after
all right.
research.
Yeah, let's do it.
So my interpretation before is really short and brief and kind of...
pedestrian.
Yeah, very pedestrian.
Okay.
My initial thought about the movie was that the film is about the abuse of women.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about mental health and how the lines can blur for an individual in the thick of a mental health crisis.
Okay.
So that's really all I thought about the film. I was like, there's abuse of women and there's some mental health issues going on here. And this is a story about being in the thralls of that.
It makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Basic layer. Absolutely.
Me not thinking too much into it or doing any research on the film.
It's not worth anyone's time to watch this movie the first time and try to figure it all out.
No.
You're best served by watching it and just living in the moment you're in.
And then sitting back and going, what the fuck did I just watch?
And then going back and watching it. This is a 2-watch movie.
Yeah,
minimum.
It is. Minimum. So after reading some of his, Lynch's interests and who he is as a person and some of the ideas that other people have come up with, this is my thought process.
Okay.
I think the film is about a woman who is cursed to watch her past repeat over and over again on different planes of existence. The idea that all these different things are happening at different periods of time in a linear fashion, but at the same time on different planes. So it's all happening linearly, but in different universes, a multiverse almost. In the movie, the existences kind of blur together, but it's all due to the curse that has been put, or some sort of evil force that's been put out there. And using the many worlds interpretation, of multiverses, this curse caused a quantum event to occur, which caused the universe to split into multiple universes, and each one a different possible outcome of the event, like her becoming a hooker or an actress.
Right.
The rabbits were a little bit harder for me to reconcile.
Yeah,
I think
in most interpretations.
In most, yeah. But if Rick and Morty taught me anything,
of course,
okay, it's that a good time cop is always needed.
You're not wrong.
So a lot like Schlingy Pants, Jackrabbit and his companions are sort of like the keepers of time or the arbiters of good, and they're trying to catch the Phantom and restore order to the multiverse. So that's my thought process after doing some research.
I like it.
Thanks.
I like it. It makes a lot of sense with a lot of different interpretations that you find. I
didn't want to hear your interpretation. I wanted to come up with my own.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear what yours is now. So
okay. I think your interpretation is great. And I definitely find a lot of little themes that you and I both picked up on that I think we had some similar thoughts on things.
All right.
So my first interpretation, like you had mentioned, a woman who's involved in abuse.
Yeah.
Experiencing other experiences that are giving her perspective. After a second watch and after my second watch, basically things changed quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I fell into the mindset of reincarnation, samsara as a concept, karma.
This you already knew about Lynch, so
Yeah,
that helps you kind of form those ideas.
I
a
knew
little bit
those
too.
were big parts of David Lynch's
Yeah.
influences. And you see that also with Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and even Twin Peaks. So it was hard for me not to, on a second viewing, bring those aspects in. So after a second viewing and a bit of research, my view kind of comes down to the idea that starting with Axon N, it talks about being the longest running radio play in history. Well, what is often referred to as the oldest profession in history, prostitution, right? This film deals with a lot of prostitution. So I threw that in there as an idea that this film is exploring the history of prostitution. It's exploring the history of women and their struggles for freedom and the abuses that they suffer, for lack of a better word, at the hands of men. Axon N, if you say axon in the right way, you almost come out with the word action. Actions have consequences, also another large concept in the film. So my view has come to be that Lost Girl, she is her own individual, but she represents women as a whole throughout time. When she's trapped in the hotel room, it's the basic woman observing, like you had mentioned, history.
Not that women are basic.
I meant like, just like
kidding.
as an idea, women as an idea. And it also is the Lost Girl watching reincarnations of herself. Because the whole idea of, say, samsara is that you repeat a cycle with the goal of becoming enlightenment and escaping the cycle. So she's watching her reincarnated selves go through, unfortunately, the exact same cycle and failing to reach enlightenment every time. There's a murder at the end. They fall back into the cycle and then it just repeats itself. Actions have consequences. None of them are taking the right actions to reach enlightenment until we end up with Nikki, who ends up spending her time in the shoes of Sue. And from being so deeply entrenched in the Sue character, Nikki eventually reaches enlightenment through the process of experience. I think the reason Lost Girl could never reach enlightenment is a key idea with reincarnation and samsara is that you can't just observe to reach enlightenment, you have to experience. So Nikki is experiencing, whereas Lost Girl is just watching. So Nikki, as a further reincarnation of Lost Girl, eventually reaches that enlightenment.
And rescues.
And giving Lost Girl the enlightenment, finally, the freedom to escape her samsara and progress with her eternity, essentially. I mean, I guess if you go into more modern, more Western interpretation of psychiatry, you end up with the id and the ego. It could be just that Lost Girl represents like the ego, the Nikki represents the id, so the experience from the id informs the ego.
Sure. What about the rabbits?
There's the plot of Lost Girl trying to reach enlightenment. Along the way, the Phantom, because there's that Polish folktale that's mentioned in the beginning by Visitor Number 1. Visitor Number 1, by the way, I believe is Lost Girl from the future, who had come back in time to help Nikki reach enlightenment. Because at the end of the film, when Nikki has reached enlightenment and Lost Girl is freed, you see Nikki kind of looking fondly on the events that are transpiring with the freedom of all the women. Visitor Number 1, the only other time that you see her again is in this ending sequence. And you see sort of like you remember those like 80s and 90s like Sears photographs where you're sitting in the chair, there's a black background and there's like your face.
Yeah.
Is kind of
turned to the side or something.
Yeah. So Visitor Number 1 is shown again, sort of smiling and smirking approvingly on this situation. So in my mind, either Visitor Number 1 is Lost Girl from the future because she also speaks Polish, or it's one of the rabbits who had taken human form to help push Nikki along, because you see that happening with Jackrabbit.
She even mentions like I think 9:45 p.m. or something like that.
I suppose if it was 9:45, I'd think it was after midnight.
And then it was mentioned at the end of the movie.
Yeah, so there's a point in the film where Smithy asks, well, the Polish version of Smithy, it's not actually Smithy, but that's another reincarnation aspect. Polish Smithy asks somebody on the street what time it is, and he says it's 9:45. In that Polish story, 9:45 is when the Polish Smithy gets killed by Phantom. So the Phantom, and this is getting to my explanation of the rabbits, I'm sorry I went on a tangent, I apologize. The Phantom, according to that fairy tale, the boy walks out the door, and
as he passed through the doorway, he caused a reflection. Evil was born. Evil was born and followed the boy.
the lost girl was married before she got sentenced to her
Purgatory,
essentially. The husband she was married to, she was cheating on. He almost represents the boy in that old fairy tale where evil is born from him stepping outside, because he ends up killing her Polish smithy lover. I almost view the Phantom as a tulpa.
What's a tulpa?
A tulpa is another concept where it is a thought form that is created. It's not necessarily, they're typically not regarded as malicious, but the creator can lose control of them, in which case they won't necessarily just become malicious out of that by their nature. They have to be informed of violence by their creator, which certainly the human Phantom would have done. In my view, there was that split where the Phantom becomes an entity and the rabbits are, like you had mentioned, sort of a guardian, doing everything they can to prevent the Phantom from finding his place or taking control of a lost girl reincarnation iteration and causing the murder and everything else that has come with that, like a guilt or an anger or a violent entity. So the rabbits then, the guardians of them, because they intervene and step in and try to prevent the Phantom kind of the whole movie.
So if anyone out there is confused
Right.
at this point, just know that both Laura Dern and Justin Theroux said that they have no idea what the film's about.
Yep.
So even the actors who are in the film have no clue what's going on.
Yes.
So don't feel like you need to figure this out, because you don't.
And we have no idea.
No idea either.
These are just the conclusions we have come to.
Yeah, which is so fun because you can come up with any conclusion you want for this film.
That's one of my favorite things about watching a Lynch film.
It's a conversation starter,
Yes.
especially if you watch it with somebody and talk about it afterwards.
And
then you start looking on stuff on the internet.
Well, and I've heard people say that the whole film is a critique on acting and has nothing really to do with a reincarnation cycle. Oh, I should say the other reason I view reincarnation as a very poignant part of this whole thing, Axon N, supposed to be the longest running radio play in history. It's retelling the same story. So E027, the movie that informed On High and Blue Tomorrows, they're retellings of a same story. So a same story being reincarnated. They even mentioned that On High and Blue Tomorrows is a remake.
On High and Blue Tomorrows is in fact a remake,
which is essentially a movie reincarnation. I just feel like those concepts are so heavy laden throughout the story that it's very interesting to watch it with a reincarnation concept in mind. But there's also a lot of evidence that points that reincarnation has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
It just really depends what mindset you go into it with.
When I was doing the research for this film, looking at concepts about time travel and multi-universes, that's where my brain started going, because I was like, it could be just like the scene where they're in the studio and they hear a noise and then Justin Theroux's character goes and checks out what the noise is. It's almost, in my brain, it's two different universes, but they're touching.
Yeah.
And he's looking in at one universe, she's looking in at the other universe, and they're touching, but they're not interacting.
Well, and it was very interesting.
They're interacting, I suppose, too, but
there's a little more to Freddy. So there's one point when Kingsley's talking about Freddy, and he mentions that Freddy has a lot of talents that other assistants don't have. So he's wonderful to have around, right? Working well with animals. And there's just so many other clues and connections that connect him to other characters in the film. There's a scene kind of late in the film where the Piotrek, but in a smithy form, is visiting three old men in a dark room with kind of just an odd little table with what looks like a bunch of food on it. And Lost Girl is sitting there, her kind of head lowered in her hands, and she's sobbing and crying. And the three old men are talking to Smithy, and they're saying, she asked for us to bring you here. Do you see her? And Smithy's looking around. He's like, I can't see her, but I can hear her. Indicating that Smithy is somehow got a extended ability more than most people do. And that's when they give him a gun.
Supernatural.
And when that scene you were talking about where Nikki or Sue is walking through the back of the warehouse where they're doing their scene run. Freddy is the one who sees someone in the darkness. He says there's someone there. Nobody else sees her. So it's almost like Freddy has that ability to see another dimension, like you had mentioned.
Sees through to another dimension.
And it's further that when Devin runs after whoever Freddy sees, Sue Nikki is yelling, Billy, 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 yelling it. And he's not hearing her. He's not reacting like he's hearing her. She walks into the facade of Smithy's house.
Yeah.
And she closes the door behind her. She can't leave the room once she's got herself in there. And she's seeing Devin peer inside the window, and he can't see her. He can't hear her. So Devin, not able to see through whatever this existential barrier or dimension is, but Freddy somehow has that touch.
Yeah. So I had talked about how Jack Rabbit's the main rabbit.
The blue-suited rabbit.
With the blue suit. I had mentioned, like, I feel like he's hunting the Phantom, and you had discussed that even in your interpretation, that he's almost kind of like trying to find the Phantom to stop his doings or whatever. He also could be an analog for Mr. K, which is the guy who's interviewing Laura Dern's character when she's got that really thick Southern accent. There's a scene where he's interviewing Laura Dern's character where she's all beat up and she's got bruises on her face. And he doesn't say anything during the whole scene.
Hold that thought real quick. That character that Laura Dern is playing seems like it's a different character. She's more violent than Sue.
Yeah.
She's more
got
angry than
weird
Sue.
Accent.
Very deep, because Sue is supposed to have a Southern accent, but this woman has a very deep accent.
Yeah.
Sue does not have
Kentucky
that.
accent, yeah.
And even Nikki doesn't have that. So I think that's a third character.
Yeah, like you had said, you'd think there's more than two characters, even though she's only credited as two. But I agree. I think it's a third. For me, it's a third universe character.
Yep, exactly.
Mr. K doesn't say anything to her, like, the entire time until she says that she was cheating. And he asks, well, were you in fact seeing another man? And then there's a phone call. And then he lets the phone ring. Just like in the sitcom, Jack Rabbit lets the phone ring for a really long time. But he actually eventually picks it up. He says to the person on the other side, hello, yeah, she's still here. I don't think it'll be too much longer now. Yeah, the horse to the well. Yeah. Crimp? Yeah, he's around here someplace, that's for sure. Which seems to indicate that Mr. K is one of the individuals that's interested in fleshing out the Phantom and leading Nikki/Sue to kill him. And then after, there's a scene where Nikki leaves the soundstage and she almost gets transported to like a supernatural movie theater. Mr. K appears, he walks through the theater, he stops at the bottom of the staircase and he stares at Nikki for a really long time. And then he walks upstairs and Nikki follows him upstairs and she finds the gun that she uses to kill the Phantom. So it's like he was leading her to the well, or the gun, leading the horse to the well. Those characters are kind of intertwined a little bit too.
Jack also appeared as kind of an older Polish man a few times. In the opening, when he appeared in that kind of lavish palace room.
Yeah.
And the Phantom was there yelling at this other man, saying, do you understand? I'm trying to find a way in. That same old man later is found leading Smithy around, trying to find the Phantom.
Yeah. And
leading him to the three old men who are doing that seance to summon the lost girl, who then give Smithy the gun, which he puts in the drawer that Mr. K then leads Nikki to, or Nikki/Sue to find.
It has a very Alice in Wonderland feel to it, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah. Rabbits.
Oh, I would also like to say another thing that I found rather poignant. Crimp and the Phantom, same entity, two different names. So there's a scene where Nikki as Sue, is in a backyard and they mention the Valley girls show up and they ask her, do you know the neighbor, the man who lives next door? That's when Nikki/Sue goes next door and is staring at this next door neighbor's house, and Crimp comes walking out from behind a tree with a red light bulb in his mouth. Yeah. And that's when Nikki/Sue grabs a screwdriver and kind of holds him at bay with this screwdriver. Now, the funny thing is that the actor who plays the Phantom, he came to set that day with some sunglasses. David Lynch hated those. He did not want those sunglasses to be worn on the set. So he demanded he not wear them. But
he's so particular.
Yeah, but the guy still wanted like some sort of accessory. So David Lynch went to a few drawers nearby and pulled out a few, like 2 or 3 little items. And you
can have these.
He held them up and he said, you can have one, pick one.
But not the sunglasses. So the guy chose this red light bulb. So David Lynch had him put it in his mouth. Well, it's a weird accessory.
It is a weird
it's
accessory.
It's a far cry from sunglasses.
But every time there's a red light shown in this movie, it's associated with prostitution and guilt almost. So it's almost like in that instance that the Phantom always around to torment and harry all these women who are prostitutes. So it's almost like saying he's consuming the women, he's consuming the prostitution, the guilt, the red light district.
Everything that red represents.
Yeah. So an odd accessory, but it seemed to make a purpose, if that is indeed a
what he wanted to
Who
do.
knows?
Yeah, well,
who even knows?
Well, and like we had mentioned, David Lynch was kind of flying by the seat of the pants with this movie, and it all kind of came together in a very poignant way.
And there's another, I'm not certain if it was just me finding a common thread or if it was intentional. The Valley Girls in this movie, they danced to 3 different songs. So they danced to Locomotion by Little Eva, they danced to Etta James' At Last, and they danced to Nina Simone's Sinner Man at the end, the ending credits.
Yes, by the way, all sang by women.
When I saw the names, I was looking through the soundtrack credits, and I knew that Nina Simone and Etta James had been fairly well documented as being involved in some pretty nasty sexual and physical domestic abuse situations. So was Little Eva.
Oh.
So all 3 of the songs presented by these 3 female musicians
were done by women who
had
had the same circumstances.
Abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I'm sure that was intentional.
It probably was.
Probably some of the few intentional things that David Lynch did. I mean,
right.
everything he did was
Everything was
intentional.
intentional.
Let's be honest. But
accidentally intentional.
Yeah. But I think there is a theme, an underlying theme to this whole movie, which would be your first watch through at this film. You know there's an underlying theme. You can tell it's something to do with the abuse of women and some weird mental health stuff and the details and how they all connect together, not so straightforward.
Yeah.
One thing that is not hard to understand is how he came up with the name for this film. He actually came up with the name after having a conversation with Laura Dern. Laura Dern had mentioned that her husband was from Inland Empire, which is an area east of Los Angeles County, which includes like Riverside and the San Bernardino County area. Lynch confesses he stopped listening to what she had said because he loved the sound of the word Inland Empire, and he finally decided on the words for the title for this movie. Quote, "I like the word inland, and I like the word empire." That's about as straightforward as you're going to get of an explanation from David Lynch. Probably because it was not out there or anything crazy. It was just what it was.
In the ending credits, there are allusions to other Lynch films pretty directly. Twin Peaks, there's a lumberjack sawing a big old log of wood. Fire Walk with Me, there's that monkey. You have Laura Herring sitting there, and she was a main character from Mulholland Drive. The woman sitting in the chair with the monkey, she's wearing a blonde wig. That blonde wig is very similar in style to the hairstyle that Patricia Arquette wears in Lost Highway.
Yeah.
It's neat to see all those sort of allusions and connections come back. And I would say, personally, this is one of the few David Lynch films that has a overtly happy ending. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, when you watch it the first time, it doesn't give you good feels because you don't know what the hell you just watched.
Right.
But when you watch it again, knowing what you know and having done gotten some information about the film, you get the sense that the sadness that the lost girl was feeling is no more because she's finally ascended and she doesn't have to go through all that pain and suffering anymore. And she gets a happy ending.
Yeah. The film that Nikki and Devin are supposed to be filming is called On High and Blue Tomorrows, right? I found it interesting. When visitor number 1 is talking to Nikki, she goes, "If it were tomorrow, you'd be sitting over there." And the next scene is Nikki sitting over there, right? With some friends, and that's when she gets the call that she got the role. But the end of the film, if you think about the fact that there's no real time in this movie.
I can't seem to remember if it's today, 2 days from now, or yesterday.
The visitor number 1 mentions that she forgets a lot.
Forgetfulness. It happens to us all. And me? Why, I'm the worst one.
Time
could
is
be
sort
after
of
midnight.
meaningless.
I wouldn't even know.
If it was 9:45, it could be, I would think it could be midnight sort of thing. And midnight is also when Lost Girl was killed. Blah, blah.
Yeah.
At the end of the film, I guess you could say technically tomorrow, Nikki is sitting over there where visitor 1 had mentioned. She's also sort of on high as her ascension. She's reached her enlightenment and she's wearing a blue dress.
brought it all together. I think we're done here.
I think so.
All right. It was nice seeing y'all. Thanks for coming to the movie theater lobby. And
Right, of course.
It all makes sense now. We're done.
Total sense. There's one other influence / allusion to another film, Sunset Boulevard. This film has a lot to do with Sunset Boulevard. From some direct visual, like stolen directly from Sunset Boulevard, to a lot of sly references. Sunset Boulevard is about a woman who gets a film role trying to get her come up again, and she loses herself in the character.
Okay.
And reaches a delusional state almost.
Very similar.
Yes, very similar.
Yeah.
To those who are not familiar with Sunset Boulevard, it ends with her saying the famous line, "I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille."
Oh, yeah.
David Lynch loves Sunset Boulevard. He said he's claimed it as one of his favorite movies. So he does like incorporating a lot of his favorite movies into things. One of his other favorite films is Wizard of Oz, which if you've watched Wild at Heart, oh gee, there's literally Glinda the Good Witch. Very Wizard of Oz inspired.
Because we had talked about Diane Ladd, who is Laura Dern's mother. She plays Marin Levins in this scene, and she says the phrase, "Mamas, lock up your daughter's doors." When she says the word mamas, the camera actually holds on a shot of Marilyn, and when she says the word daughters, the camera cuts to a shot of Nikki.
Right.
So that was a little sly nod for Lynch to point out that Ladd and Dern
relation. So one last little cameo appearance, and I'm only mentioning it because we covered Death Proof.
Sure.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be particularly significant. Jordan Ladd, who played Shanna Banana in Death Proof. Her mother is Cheryl Ladd, played in Charlie's Angels. We mentioned that before, too. Jordan Ladd appears in this film as one of the Valley Girls, not, kind of underlined, not related to Diane Ladd and Laura Dern.
Just a coincidence.
Just the same last name.
Yeah. Yeah, the Valley Girls were interesting in this film.
They were.
Every time they're on screen, they show up as prostitutes. They show up as like girls having a slumber party. Yeah. They show up at that picnic. They show up on the street when they're trying to tell her where she needs to go. They're almost like they're like her Jiminy Cricket.
I felt like they were other women who throughout time and history have suffered abuse, trying to help Nikki / the Lost Girl / Sue / whoever reach this point where they can also feel free.
And if you're looking at it from my perspective, there are other women from other worlds,
dimensions, realities.
Yeah, other dimensions, other realities that maybe have the same ability to cross planes and are guiding her into not being on this curse anymore and being able to get their universes back in order. You can't tell someone their interpretation's wrong unless they're like, not. This is about a man and his ability to hunt for deer.
Yeah.
I'm like, what movie did you watch?
Sorry, bro. You watched the wrong ass movie.
Yeah, then you're wrong, okay?
That's called Bambi.
Yeah, that's Bambi.
Which is also not what Bambi's Anyway, are we done here, Leia?
I think that's it, Brandon. I mean, you know, a lot of musings in this one.
Very much so.
Yeah. So sorry if you got lost.
We're all going to be lost with this one. We've reached a point where we should all get out of our little hotel room.
Yes.
And move on with our days
and move on with our days and stop watching the screen.
Yes.
So I do hope you all keep in touch with us.
Indeed. To do so, check out themovietheaterlobby.com and reach us at The Movie Lobby on Blue Sky and YouTube. And then along the way, if you want to, find me, Brandon, Brand MC, on Blue Sky as well.
You can find me, Leia McClevey, at LM Nerd Room on pretty much any social, and at lmnerdroom@gmail.com. And while I've got you here, next week we will be turning from the esoteric land of Lynch to the unique Western vision that is Dead Man.
Great. For all of us to continue on our paths, I must thank you all for your time, for coming to listen with us here. And Leia, of course, 100% as always, thank you.
And thank you, Brandon.
We'll see you all next week on
The Movie Theater Lobby.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Not through the marketplace, you see that, don't you? But through the alley behind the marketplace. This is the way to the palace.